Jever Air Force Base, a bustling military outpost in northern Germany. It's here that they gut about a dozen decommissioned fighter jets every year. This F-4 Phantom fighter jet was retired from active duty about 6 months ago. F-4s have flown for decades in North America, Europe, and the Middle East. This one made its final landing at Jever. But now, this fighting machine, equipped with twin turbojet engines, is headed for a breakdown. The man in charge is Captain Christian Nastula.
Fahrwerk ausfahren.
He directs all breakdown operations here.
Okay, Fahrwerk einfahren.
The aircraft behind me was built in the early 70s. It has now passed 6,300 flying hours. You can say that it reached the end of its life.
This F-4 may have been grounded, but its service to country isn't over. There are still about 50 F-4s serving in the German Air Force. And this decommissioned fighter is a critical source of the components needed to keep the fleet going. That's what brings Captain Timo Young on base. He works with an active squadron of F-4 Phantoms, and he's eager to get his hands on some of the fighter jet's components.
We need spare parts for the other planes that we are still flying, and the F-4 is not produced anymore, so we are quite in need of some spare parts. Every plane that we have in service is older than I am. It's an old lady, but it's getting the job done.
It's a high-stakes operation that has to be done right. It takes about 10 teams of specialists to break her down. Not only is the plane big, but it's still armed with weapons that must be deactivated safely. The crew will systematically dismantle her piece by piece over a 10-week period. The breakdown will unfold in 3 stages. Stage 1, testing. Check the mechanics and electronics to find out what's working and if it can be salvaged. Stage 2, disarm, remove and destroy any remaining weaponry. Then comes the labor-intensive part. Stage 3, dismantle. Remove all salvageable components, including the engines, ejection seats, wings, and dozens of internal instruments. When they're done, all that will be left is the aluminum carcass. And a shipment of vital parts ready to be rebuilt and installed in active-duty Phantoms. Stage 1 of the breakdown kicks off with a crucial test of the power behind the package, the Phantom's twin turbine engines. This model is no longer in production and can't be replaced, so every engine they can salvage is a potential gold mine. They could go for upwards of $1 million on the open market. But first, Captain Nastula needs to put the engines through a series of tests to make sure they're in top condition.
The engine is really complicated. It's really a piece of art.
These engines can propel the jet to Mach 2, twice the speed of sound.
You have to pay a very close attention to every detail of the engine. The temperature, the revolutions per minute, the amount of fuel that's going through the engine, and that everything is working properly.
But firing up a jet in an enclosed space is a dangerous operation. Each engine will be fired to maximum capacity, sending flames jutting 4 meters behind the fuselage. Anything in the flame's path is toast. So Captain Nastula orders the crew to clear the hangar of anything flammable. Then they scour the area for foreign objects, looking for anything that could get sucked into the engines and cause an explosion. Though it's rare, an exploding jet engine could cause a catastrophe and endanger the entire crew.
I was inspecting the compressor rotors for visual damage and foreign objects that might reside in the air intake.
But it's not just the breakdown crew they have to worry about. It's a risky procedure, but crucial. These engines will be installed on active planes. Even the smallest defect could cause an airborne disaster.
The technicians, we have to trust them because they're responsible that the engine is working properly. Their work affects our flight safety. And after they are done with their work, we are ready for the engines test.
After hours of preparation, the crew is ready to fire it up. But suddenly, a technician catches a problem. A small gas leak in one of the engine's fuel pipes. If they start the engines now, a fire could break out. Or worse, a deadly explosion.
They had to replace a part of the fuel pipeline.
Pressure is off.
Captain Nastula is worried. The fuel linkage could endanger his crew. He assigned Staff Sergeant Karsten Karolus, one of his most experienced mechanics, to fix it.
I'll have to attach a safety wire so that the lug nut in the fuel line will not detach again.
It's a bit difficult. Sometimes you can see what you're doing, sometimes you can only see what your hands are telling you.
Hopefully, the problem will be resolved quickly and they can resume the engine test.
He's giving full pressure.
Any updates? I've released pressure.
All right, we checked the pipe. I think it's fine now.
We just got the message that the installed fuel pipeline is tight. Everything's working properly now, so we can start in a couple of minutes.
But Captain Nastula isn't taking any chances. He calls in the fire brigade.
The fire crew are basically as a safety precaution here because it could be that fuel is leaking in the engine compartment and igniting, and then we would have fire. We are ready for the engines test, so we have to leave the area, clear it for our safety.
They'll run the engines through a number of performance tests. The engines must reach maximum thrust. Then they must push even harder by engaging the afterburner. Captain Nastula gives the order. Start the engines.
Compressed air is pumped into the engine. It starts to rotate and ignites. And then it's running under its own power.
The engines are on. Now it's time to gun it.
Now he's increasing the thrust to military, that's 100%. They're checking if it's still working as it's supposed to.
Wenn es möglich ist.
The fire brigade goes on high alert.
Now they're increasing the thrust.
As air enters the jet engine, it compresses and mixes with fuel inside the turbine. This mixture explodes and expands rapidly. When the expanded air leaves the rear of the turbine, it creates thrust. The engines reach full military thrust. These powerful motors facilitated numerous speed records for the F-4 back in the day.
Everything is working normal.
Then, Captain Christian Nastula instructs the crew to engage the afterburner. The afterburner injects fuel directly into the airstream at the rear of the engine's turbine. This increases the engine's thrust by as much as 50%. Pilots use the afterburner during takeoff and when traveling at supersonic speeds. But generally, they exercise restraint because the afterburner uses so much fuel. The engines are good to go. The crew has hit pay dirt. Two of the most valuable parts on the jet are fit for breakdown, and the fuel pipe held.
Everything worked as it's supposed to.
This F-4 may be headed for a breakdown, but her engines will live to fly another day. Germany and 10 other countries have adopted the F-4 Phantom from the American military. Debuted in 1958, the F-4 is one of America's earliest fighter jets. It's seen action during the Cold War, Vietnam, and Operation Desert Storm. Pilots credit its endurance to its versatility and its ability to carry huge payloads of weapons. The U.S. military phased out the F-4 in the mid-90s. But instead of breaking them down, the Air Force has come up with an alternate retirement plan. Convert some of the remaining arsenal into unmanned drones to become target practice for America's next generation of